Hi, welcome to Ring Talk. I'm your host, Lou Eisen, and today we cover one of the most iconic fights of all time in boxing history and one of the happiest moments of my entire life when Muhammad Ali regained on October 30th, 1974, in Kinshasa, Zaire, which is the Belgian Congo. He regained a world heavyweight title by defeating the invincible George Foreman, or as Muhammad himself said, that big, bad, ugly monster that no one said I could beat. Ali was a huge underdog. In fact, right before they went into the ring, Foreman and his handlers, Archie Moore, Dick Sadler, they prayed that they wouldn't take Ali's life. That's what most people thought back then, that Ali stood a good chance of being killed. And people were saying to George in the lead up to the fight, fans, celebrities, you can beat Ali, but he's done so much for African Americans and for all people. Just don't kill him. I mean, beat him, but don't take his life. And Foreman had to hear that every day. George Foreman was born January 10th, 1949 in Marshall, Texas, which is interesting because Muhammad Ali was born January 17th, 1942, 7 years earlier, in Louisville, Kentucky, which is why he was called the Louisville Lip. George Foreman, by his own admission, was a bad kid growing up. He was physically huge at a young age, engaged in a lot of petty crime, mugging, stealing, thievery, and he grew up in the toughest district in the United States, the Fifth Ward in Houston. There's a lot of tough areas in various cities throughout the United States, especially New York, California, but Los Angeles, but nothing as tough as the Fifth Ward. And so George was sort of like a leader back then because of his overwhelming physical size. He went to school for a very short time. And he said the turning point in his life came when he told his mother he was going to school. His mother left for work, and then he snuck back into the house through a side window and went back to sleep. His sister walked by, an older sister saw him, and he looked up and he went, uh-oh. And she said, no, it's all right. You can go back to bed. We're all losers. No one cares about us. We're not going to be anything anyways. And that really upset him. And so he had his mother sign a form for him to get into the Job Corps. And George Foreman's always said that he's the product of a more compassionate America. This was in the middle 60s. And he went to the Job Corps, and that was an organization that would train young kids who didn't have much education and didn't have any skills. They would train them in different trades so they would actually have a future and could make a living and support themselves and a family. So George goes to the Job Corps. He flies away to Oregon, to this plush valley and all these wonderful different places to live. And he learned how to be a carpenter. George said the turning point in his life, though, was up until his mid-teens, he was illiterate. And he said being illiterate was like living in a dark room. And when he got to the Job Corps Center, they taught him how to read and write. And he said it was like this huge light being switched on in his life. And from that day forward to today, he's been a voracious reader. He can never get enough knowledge. So George is there, but he's still surly. He still likes to fight. He's happy he's learned to read. He's happy he's learning a trade, but he still loves to fight, and he's looking for fights. And they call him Doc Brodus. And Doc Brodus was a boxing trainer, a veteran boxing trainer, and he took George under his wing, and he ran him through some workouts in a boxing gym. And from the first day, he said in 40 years in the business, he'd never seen anyone with power like that. George was hitting a heavy bag the way you hit a speed bag. I mean, he was just so phenomenally strong. And he sat him down and he said, listen, if your behavior improves, I will train you. And this is your ticket out of being poor. You have to become an amateur boxer, which he did. He had a 24 and 2 or 24-4 amateur record. And he was entered into the Olympics. He made the 1968 Olympic team. The interesting thing about the Olympics in 68, of course, they were held in Mexico, and then you had all this. This was when all the civil unrest was going on in the United States. This was 1968. Ali had won the light heavyweight gold medal for the United States in 1960. Joe Frazier won the heavyweight gold medal for the United States in 64. And in 68, George Foreman won the heavyweight gold medal. And the guys that he fought, Johannes Sapoulas was the guy that he beat for the gold medal. But all these guys, Sapoulas, all of them, these were technically amateurs, but really these were grown men in their 30s who'd been boxing for well over 20 years. They were, for all intents and purposes, professionals. And they had skill, and they'd watched George Foreman, and they said, well, I'll slip his punches and I'll counter punch him. But it didn't work out that way. Foreman was 19. And if you watch it, and you can watch these fights on YouTube, except for one fight that went to full 3 rounds that he won by decision, he bludgeoned other guys. He didn't just beat them up. He poleaxed them. You watch the fight with Sapoulas, within the first couple seconds, George lands a left jab, breaks the guy's nose. Now his face is gushing blood. This is like 10 seconds into the fight. And then he hits him with a right hand on the mouth, knocks a bunch of teeth out. The fight's not 20 seconds old, and this guy's like, what on earth is happening here? And George just keeps bludgeoning him and punching him. And the guy's trying to do what he's able to do. I mean, he's a technically skilled fighter, but George's strength is so overwhelming that the referee stops the fight in the second round. Just about all of his fights in the Olympics were second round knockouts. So George wins the gold medal, and he unleashes a controversy because he unfurls an American flag. And this was during the height of the civil rights movement in the United States. At that time, Edwards and Carlos were the two African-American athletes who held their right hands up in Black Power salutes, wearing a black glove. So they were supported by the vast majority of African Americans. Foreman pulling out a flag, he took a lot of flack for that. I don't think it was justified, though, because he was only 19. He wasn't politically aware. And he wanted people to know, hey, I was down and out. My country gave me a chance to be something. It helped me. And he just took out this flag and waved it. He turned pro, and he started just on his way up the ladder. First 24, 25 fights. I think he won all of them except 1 or 2 by knockout. And he's fighting the regular people. And when I mean regular people, heavyweights that most people have heard, not top tier heavyweights, but still second tier, third tier, but guys that can fight. And Foreman's destroying them. At that time, Muhammad Ali's not in boxing. He had his title stolen from him in 1967 by the criminals, convicted felons who ran the boxing sanctioning bodies. And so he's out, and Ali at that point is the head of the civil rights movement. He's the head of the Black Power movement, and he's the head of the youth movement. Everything coalescing around Muhammad Ali. And so Ali is campaigning to get back in the ring. This is what he does, and he had his title stolen from him. 1970, he manages to get a fight in Atlanta because they don't really have a boxing commission. And so he fights in Atlanta, and he stops Jerry Corey. First fight in almost 4 years. Stops Corey in 3 rounds. Cuts him up really badly. Next fight, he fights the Bulldog Ringo, Oscar Bonavena from Argentina. And Bonavena was a squat, 5'11", 6-foot fighter who had very little skill, but he would just stay on your chest and hit you from all angles. And he was really annoying Ali in the pre-fight build-up by calling him Clay, calling him a chicken for not going into the army. And Ali said, I've never wanted to beat a man like I wanted to beat Bonavena. And it was a pretty dull fight until the 15th round. Ali was winning, and Ali dropped him 3 times and stopped him. And then Ali gets his chance to fight Joe Frazier. Now, right at that time in 71, the Supreme Court rules that Ali is a free man. They overturn his conviction on draft evasion. They recognize the fact that he's a conscientious objector. So he wins by unanimous decision in the Supreme Court. So the Supreme Court gives him his freedom back. It can't give him his world heavyweight title back. So he fights Joe Frazier. Now, Angelo Dundee told me that they wanted to have 2 or 3 more fights before taking Frazier on. Why didn't they? Because Ali had been fighting in court now for 4 years. It cost him millions of dollars. He was out of money. He had to fight Frazier, and each fighter got $2.5 million. Most of Ali's money went to the lawyers. So he fights Frazier. It's a close fight. Ali lands a fair amount more punches, but Frazier is the effective aggressor throughout the fight. Frazier wins a unanimous decision, the first loss of Muhammad Ali's career. Frazier goes on and continues to fight, and he's fighting a couple of guys that he's not fighting guys that are up to his standard. He fights a guy named Dave Ziglowitz, who's basically a bar fighter, and knocks him out in 69 seconds. He fights from Council Bluffs, Iowa, Ron Sander, who was a tough SOB, and he ends up knocking out Ron Sander. So Frazier's cruising along, but he's not really extending himself in the ring. He's not really taking on more dangerous opponents. At that time, Ali launches a comeback, another comeback, where after losing to Frazier, he's winning fights. And he's fighting guys all over the world. He beats Canada's George Chiavello, who was ranked number 7th in the world at that time. He beats him in 1972. And he keeps fighting and fighting and fighting and fighting. And he's fighting every month or every couple months, because at that point, he didn't like to train. So Ali is continuing to fight, and he fights Ken Norton in San Diego. And my friend Art Hafey, who's one of the greatest fighters that Canada ever produced, or any country, who was the best featherweight on the planet for 4 years, fought on the undercard. And he said, he shared the dressing room with Ali. And he said, Muhammad, after the fight, said, I took him too lightly. I didn't train. Norton was not known to anyone. He was only known to people in San Diego. That was it. And in the second round, Norton, who fought out of an Archie Moore type defense, he had a crab-like defense. He would fight with his arms like this. He was very awkward, herky-jerky fighter. And Angelo didn't want Ali to take the fight because he always had trouble with guys like that. And Norton broke his jaw in the second round. Ali somehow managed to last the distance, but he lost a split decision. So Ali loses. 6 months later, he fights Norton again, and he wins. So now he's done that. He's avenged one of his losses. He continues to fight. Frazier and Ali are talking. They're going to have a second fight for the world heavyweight title. But Frazier has to get past this easy defense against the young George Foreman in Kingston, Jamaica in 1973. And Frazier was the favorite. Foreman was looked at as a clumsy slugger. And that was very unfair to him because he was so much smarter in the ring, as we found out later, out of the ring, than anyone ever gave him credit for. So you can see when they meet at the center of the ring for the stare down, Foreman has a Sonny Liston look on his face. He wants to kill Joe Frazier. And he had trained with Liston, as an amateur. And when he first turned professional, he had trained with Sonny Liston. He knew how to intimidate people. And so Foreman gets in there, and he's fighting Frazier, and Frazier is throwing these left hooks, can't land. There's such a height differential. Foreman is just under 6'4". Frazier is barely 6 feet. Foreman's using that pull-axing jab, which looks slow, but always lands. And when it lands, it does damage. And near the end of the first round, he hits Frazier with a quick left hand, a jab, and then comes over with a straight right, and Frazier falls against the ropes, hits him with the right uppercut, and Frazier goes down. And Howard Cosell can't believe it. Down goes Frazier. Down goes Frazier. And he gets up, and Frazier's whacking him, and bell rings, and then come out for the second round, and Foreman drops him, I think 5 more times. He just keeps pounding him away, and it's just an unmerciful beating. Frazier keeps getting up instantly every time he gets knocked down, but that's more out of reflex than courage. The final knockdown, or the second last knockdown in the round, he hit Frazier an uppercut, and one writer wrote that it was like watching a fire hydrant being ripped from the pavement. And he had literally knocked Frazier a good 2 to 3 feet in the air with one punch. That's how strong. That's extraordinarily powerful. That's how strong George Foreman was. And Angelo Dundee, who was ringside doing the commentary, is screaming. You can hear him, "Stop the fight. What are you waiting for? He's going to kill him. Stop it." Arthur McCanty, after the 6th knockdown, finally stops the fight. And now Ali's got a big problem because the fight with Frazier goes out the window. Right? What are you going to do now? He wants the world title. Now Foreman has it. Foreman, who's younger than Liston was when Liston held the title. And Ali is 7 years older than Foreman. So Ali fights Ali fights Frazier in a rematch in 1974, Madison Square Garden. It's a lackluster fight. Both men aren't as hyped up as they were for the first encounter. And Ali wins a decision, unanimous decision. And then at that time, Foreman has 2 title defenses. The first one is against Joe King Roman in Tokyo, which I don't know how Roman I don't even think he was rated in the top 10 or top 20 in the heavyweight division. Foreman took him out easily, I believe in the first round. Excuse me. And then he fought Ken Norton. Ken Norton was an interesting fight because people thought Norton, because he'd beaten Ali, had a chance to beat Foreman. Norton was physically the same size, and he was like they called him the Black Hercules. And so Norton's idea, at the Hall of Fame years later, he told me what I wanted to do was I wanted to walk him into punches. I didn't want to stand in front of him and trade because he's so strong. So I wanted to back up, and as he came forward, hit him with my jab and then a right hand. But he said, unfortunately, the more I backed up, the more he kept pounding me with his jab and his right hand, and it just didn't work out. So the fight starts, and Foreman just overwhelms Norton. He's pounding him. It's an even fight for the first minute and a half, and then near the end of the first round, he knocks him down, and Norton's out, but he gets up, comes out for the second round, and Foreman knocks him down, gets up, and then knocks him out cold. And Ali was ringside, and he'd already signed to fight Foreman for the title. And Bob Sheridan said to him, "How do you do that? How do you beat a guy like that? Norton beat you in your first fight, broke your jaw. Frazier beat you in your first fight, and neither of them went a full 2 rounds with George Foreman. Now you got to fight Foreman." And Ali said, "I admit, I fought a lot of guys that were stronger than me. Mildenberger was stronger. George Chuvalo was stronger than me. Sonny Liston was stronger than me. Oscar Bonavena was stronger than me. So was Corey. But I can beat him on science." He said, "George Foreman punches around," which he was doing. He loops the shots. Anyone who throws looping shots can't beat a guy who punches straight like me. And the thing about boxing is there's no logic to it, as in other sports. Just because Foreman knocked out Norton in 2 rounds and Frazier in 2 rounds doesn't necessarily mean he's going to do the same thing to Ali. That's what people thought would happen. But it doesn't always work out that way, and you can go back through boxing history and see that. So they signed to fight in Kinshasa, Zaire. And the reason they did that was Don King was promoting. He promised each fighter $5 million, but he didn't have $5 million. So he shopped it around, and Mobutu Sese Seko, the bloodthirsty dictator of Zaire, said he very poor country. He was wealthy because he'd stolen from the country's coffers. He said he'd put the fight on. So they put the fight on in Zaire. And the original fight was supposed to be for September 24th. But unfortunately, in training, George Foreman caught an elbow on his eyelid, cut it open. So now they had to delay the fight. And Ali was really upset at first. Bring Joe Frazier over, bring Norton over, bring someone over. They can't cancel this. And they said, it's not as bad as we thought. It'll just be a 4-week delay. We'll have the fight October 30th. And in that month, Angelo Dundee told me, was what made Ali. That month, that extra month of training, helped Ali because he didn't sit around depressed. He got up every day and he trained. And he trained hard. He became more acclimated to the very hot and humid African climate. The one thing Ali did that Foreman didn't do was Ali trained at 3 in the morning because the fight would be held in Africa at 3 in the morning. That was so it would coincide with, the right time in the United States and North America. It was shown in over 450 closed circuit venues in Canada and the United States, and I watched it at Maple Leaf Gardens. Now, Foreman was a prohibitive favorite. No one thought Ali could go the distance, and they thought Ali was just going to get destroyed by him, and people were worried about that. Howard Cosell said Ali shouldn't take this fight. He's in mortal danger. That's what most people thought. Most experts, so-called experts, thought Ali didn't have a chance. But, at the press conference in New York, when all these reporters, white reporters, would ask Ali questions, aren't you afraid of George Foreman? Haven't you seen how he hurts people? Aren't you afraid he's going to do that to you? And Ali sat there, and Drew Brandini Brown, his witch doctor, his shaman, was sitting beneath Ali, and Ali was rubbing his head, and just acting silly. And Ali said, there's something that white people never understand about black folks. He said, to a white guy, George Foreman's a big, bad, ugly monster that no one can beat. But to a black guy, he's just another guy in the ghetto. He said, you have to understand, black people aren't afraid of black people the same way white people are afraid of black people. That's what Ali said. And so people laughed at that. And Ali, during his training at Deer Park, Pennsylvania, and then over in Zaire, they had spies in each other's camp. And some former sparring partners of Foreman came over to talk to Ali. And they asked what kind of punches George throws. And they said his most devastating punch is the anywhere punch, which means he winds up, he hits you, and anywhere it lands, it'll do damage. And Foreman was wearing out sparring partners. Ali was lying on the ropes, taking shots. He was dancing. He was preparing himself mentally for the fight. That's what he was doing in all of his fights when he was boasting and bragging. He was building up the gate, but he was trying to convince himself that, yes, I could do this. And he said, it's only fitting that I go out of boxing 10 years to the day I came into it by beating some big, bad, ugly monster that no one said I can beat. Foreman was a younger Sonny Liston, a bigger and a stronger Sonny Liston, and a better boxer. So they get into the ring, and of course, Ali goes into the ring first, and he turns around, and just before they make their entrance into the ring, everyone on his team, it looks like they're about to cry, and Ali says, it looks like it's a funeral. What are you guys doing? This isn't a bad night. This is an historic night. I reclaimed the crown tonight. This is just another magical night in the wonderful life of Muhammad Ali. And Angelo said it calmed everyone down. So they get in the ring, and Ali's getting time to wait in the ring. And Foreman's making him wait 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15, 20. It's almost half an hour now. And Ali wasn't upset at all. He said, great, I'm getting used to the ring. The fans are on my side. And by getting used to the ring, I mean he's walking all over the ring, finding out where the soft spots are, or where the canvas is tight, where the ring is slow. It was a bit of a slow ring because it was soft. And a slow ring doesn't favor a dancer like Ali. And he's getting used to the ropes, where they're loose, where they're tight. Finally, Foreman makes his entrance, runs into the ring. And as they get to the center of the ring, Zach Clayton gives him the instructions, and Ali's talking to Foreman, and Foreman's just giving him that Sonny Liston look. And Ali's talking to him, and Foreman told me this years later, he almost laughed. He didn't. He almost broke character when Ali said, you've been thinking about me your whole life. You thought about me every day in high school. And Foreman said he wanted to say, but he didn't. Muhammad, I never went to high school. I was a petty thief. I never went to high school. What are you thinking? That's the reason I'm a fighter. And so they finish the instructions, and the bell rings. The most important moment in the fight happens, although people may not know it at the time, when Ali comes out and throws a straight right hand and catches Foreman. Before the fight, he called up Costamato and said, what do I do with this guy? How do I beat this guy? And Costamato said, you know what you want to do? You want to get his respect. How do you get his respect? you go out and you throw a straight right hand. And the reason that was so important, a straight right hand with no jab is a sucker punch. And it's a sucker punch because you're throwing it across your body. You're telegraphing the punch. The guy across from you can see the punch coming. So what you're saying to him in essence is, I have no respect for your boxing ability. I'm going to throw this right hand and I'm going to land it. And that's how little talent you have when it comes to technical boxing skill. And Ali landed it. And then he comes in to throw a left, but Foreman had recovered and he retreats. And Ali's dancing around the ring, and Foreman's chasing him and cutting him off. And as this is going on in the first round, Ali's thinking to himself, no one ever told me this. No one ever told me that this guy knows what he's doing. Foreman was brilliant at cutting off the ring. When it came to cutting off the ring, no one could cut off a ring like George Foreman. And so Ali gets to his corner, and they're administering to him. And then he stands up when it's time for the next round to start. But he has a look on his face. And I spoke to Norman Mailer about this on the set of Cinderella Man. And he said it was almost like Ali looked within himself. Here it was. Sonny Liston, much bigger, much stronger, much younger, much more energy. This is the mountain I was afraid of. And he's got to figure out a way to beat him. And he thinks to himself, I can't keep dancing. If I keep dancing, I'll tire out and he'll knock me out in 5 or 6 rounds, because I'm taking 10 steps to every 2 or 3 steps he takes. That doesn't work in my favor. And he figures, what do I have to do? I got to tire him out. And so Ali retreats to the ropes. And for the second round, third round, fourth round, you can hear Angelo Dundee screaming, get off the ropes, Ali, move. And he keeps screaming at him. And in between rounds, he's saying, get off the ropes. And finally, Muhammad said, shut up. I know what I'm doing. He's too young. I can't dance. I'll tire out. I got to make him shoot his wad. I got to make him expend all his energy. And then I'll take him out. And you saw in the fight, in the third round, I think fourth round actually, and other rounds, Ali is staggering Foreman. He's hitting him with straight right hands. Ali still had that amazing hand speed. And so when Foreman would hit him, and Ali would clinch and then bend his neck down, which puts a lot of strain on a fighter, on his legs and on his back and his neck, referee would break them up. Ali would move off the ropes, catch Foreman with a quick 4 or 5 punch combination, and then move back to the ropes and let Foreman wail away on him as Ali caught the shots on his arms. Now, Ali did take some shots. I think in the 6th round or 5th round, took a tremendous left hook to the head, but he took him, he took him. He hit the ropes, snapped back to life, and he came back. And then as the fight progressed into rounds 5, 6, and 7, what Ali was doing was he'd come out at the beginning of the round, he'd whack Foreman a couple times, and then he'd slowly retreat to the ropes. And as Foreman came after him, he'd catch him with quick shots coming in. And by the time he got to the ropes, Foreman was losing his energy. As the fight progressed, Foreman was punching himself out. And that's because Foreman's mindset was, I'm going to destroy him. No one can stand up to my power. And as Foreman said, no one had ever beaten him before. He'd beaten everyone easily. And so he's backing up, Ali's backing up, taking all these shots, and he's talking to Foreman the whole time. Is that all you have? You call that a left hook? You punch like a sissy. I didn't think you could fight like that. I thought you were supposed to be tougher. I thought you were supposed to be stronger. And he kept whispering in his ear, in second round, he said, 13 more rounds, George, 39 minutes. It's 105 degrees. Feel the humidity. And he kept whispering it to him, and Foreman was exhausted. Foreman had never had to go that long a distance in a fight. And as Ali had said before the fight, I want to see how he's going to react in rounds 8, 9, 10, and 11. I'm telling you right now, as sure as we're at Madison Square Garden for this press conference, his parachute will not open. He's young. He believes he's invincible. He can't conceive of a fight going beyond 2 rounds. I'm going to take him into deep waters and drown him. And that's what Ali did. And then we get to the 8th round. And in the 8th round, Ali is against the ropes. And just before the 8th round started, Angelo said he looks out of it. And Muhammad said, yeah, I think I can get rid of him, but I want to play with him first. And Angelo said, no, that's the one agreement we have, Muhammad. You don't play with the guy when you have him ready to go. You never know what can happen. Get him out now. And Muhammad goes into the 8th round, He's letting George throw these wild punches out the window, no steam on them, no power. Ali slips to his right off the ropes, slides off the ropes, hits him with a left jab, catches him with a right hand, and a quick 4 or 5 punch flurry, hits him with a hard right, bang. And then Foreman twirls around and he leans, and as he's about to fall, Ali cocks his right hand to hit him one more time and then decides it's not necessary. It's almost like he was appreciating the aesthetic of the moment. Like, I don't want to ruin the moment. And so Foreman hits the canvas. Foreman, and he's right. He was right. He said you look at your corner and they tell you when to get up, but his corner's screwed up. And by the time he's getting up, Zach Clayton says 10. And then there was bedlam. Bedlam in the ring, bedlam all over the world. At Toronto's Maple Leaf Gardens, which was sold out with 18,000 people, people were screaming. I was jumping on my chair. I was 14. I was screaming and crying. I told people at school all week Ali would win. They all laughed at me. And Ali did it. Ali had climbed the throne. He had come back and taken the title that was so unjustly stolen from him. And as he's going to the dressing room, he's talking to people. But once he's being interviewed by David Frost, he points his finger and he said, I told all of you hypocrites to write into Ring magazine. I told you in 1964, I'm the greatest fighter of all time. I told you when I beat Sonny Liston, I'm the greatest that ever lived. Now you have to give it to me. Crawl. All of you crawl. You'll never get me. Maybe when I'm 50, but not even then. And so he had done it. Everyone was happy. Ali had regained the throne. Foreman went into a tailspin. He was depressed because he'd never been beaten. He'd never contemplated that. And it took him 20 years to get over it until he actually sat up in bed one night and said to his wife, you know what? Muhammad beat me, and there's nothing wrong with that. It happens. Ironically, Ali kept fighting and fighting, as we know, and lost to Leon Spinks, won the title again a third time, and then fought Larry Holmes and Trevor Berbick in 2 bad fights, but retired as an iconic world legend, the most famous man on the face of the earth. George Foreman, whom I love very much and adore, stepped out of boxing for 10 years. And after his last fight in 77 against Jimmy Young, he was dehydrated and he said, a religious moment where he was born again. And although they said he was dehydrated, I believe him because I've never known George Foreman not to be truthful under any circumstance. And so 10 years later, he makes his tremendous comeback. Now, he didn't make the comeback. He made the comeback, he said, because he wanted to raise money for the George Foreman Youth Center. That's partly true. But he made the comeback because he had a 10-year services contract to Don King, and it was over in 87. So then he hired a former federal prosecutor as his lawyer, and the guy spoke to Don King. George is making a comeback. How much? Don said, how much does he weigh? 450 or 420 pounds. And you want a part of it? No, not interested at all. And the lawyer said, we're taping the conversation. We have you on record as not being interested at all. And he said, and King said, George will have a heart attack before he gets into a fight. And of course, before his next fight, he's down 70 pounds to 350. The fight after, he's down to 310. Finally settles at 260. He fights, he gets a chance at Tommy Morrison for the WBO title. He loses that. He fights Evander Holyfield and he loses that fight. He gets one more chance and he fights Michael Moore. Excuse me. Michael Moore was a southpaw who had beaten Holyfield for the title. And during the fight, this shows you how smart Foreman was. When he's fighting Michael Moore, he keeps throwing his left hand. George keeps throwing left. And he's landing it occasionally. But what he's doing, it doesn't really care if it lands. He's moving infinitesimally, baby steps, Moore. He's making Moore move to Moore's left, right into the pathway of George's right hand. And finally, in the 10th round, and all through the fight, by the way, Teddy Atlas in Moore's corner said, you're not seeing what he's doing. He's sucking you into a right hand. He's getting you to move over it. And Moore said, I'm not worried about it. I'm going to knock him out. No, you're not going to knock George Foreman out. That's not going to happen. You understand that? Ali did that, and it'll never happen again. He knows what he's doing. I'm begging you, don't move to your left. And Moore was beating the hell out of Foreman. He was much younger and quicker. But sure enough, after 8th and 9th round, Angelo Dundee, who's now in Foreman's corner, all these years later said to George, we're running out of rounds. And George said, what are you talking about rounds? I can't beat him on rounds. I'm in my middle 40s. I can't beat anybody in rounds. Power. That's how I'll beat him. And so in the 10th round, he comes out, hits him with a jab, that tremendous poleaxing jab, stuns Moore, hits him with the right hand. Moore's eyes roll a bit, hits him with another jab, and then he puts everything, his full 260 pounds, into a straight right hand, and Moore is out. They count 10, but it's a formality. George Foreman had come back 20 years almost to the day that he lost to Ali and reclaimed the world lineal, the undisputed world heavyweight champion. So it's really a great story. The two became very close friends. They were close friends right after their fight. Ali never truly despised anyone he fought. And him and George were very close. George went on, and now, of course, is one of the smartest businessmen on the planet. He owns a NASCAR team. He breeds German Shepherds. He breeds horses. He's got the George Foreman grill. Very wealthy man, and he earned it all with his brains. It was a great fight. It was a historic night in boxing. And it's a great story because Ali reclaims his throne, and then 20 years later, George Foreman reclaims the same throne. So in closing, I just like to say, if you get a chance, watch the fight. Watch the Ali Foreman fight. It was Ali's best fight in his second incarnation in his career. As Ali said, the best fight for the fans was the third Frazier fight. The fight I was at my best physically was the Cleveland Williams fight. And the fight that meant the most to me was when I beat George Foreman. He said, no one will ever know how much that meant to me. Thank you for watching. This has been Ring Talk. I'm Lou Eisen. Enjoy the rest of your day. Eric, you there? Well, I guess it's not the end of Ring Talk. I thought it was. Eric.